All right, we'll now link up with Shoma Moimodu and TJ Suadeoye in our Abuja studio for FCT Brief. They will be having a conversation on the amendments that INEC is seeking to bring on board. Good morning, guys. How are you doing? Handing over the conversation to you now.
Good morning, Veronica. It's good to hear from you this morning. Good morning, Ashomomo.
Yeah, electoral reforms.
Well, as you can see, the wave of the election is heating up already.
Exactly.
And, you know, talks about how the election should be run is what is on the front burner.
Yeah.
INEC's performance is going to be put for people to judge. You know, previous elections, a lot of people did not really score INEC very high in the conduct of election. The transmission of results stirred up a lot of, controversy then. But now that we are talking reforms, I think it's a good way to go.
Yeah, because the credibility of INEC is on the stake, and it's important before any election that credibility issue is addressed. And I think these reforms, and so the ball is also in the court of the National Assembly that, look, you need to pass this bill on time and sign into law so that you have enough time for it. But let's see how it goes.
We'll keep an eye on that. Well, good morning, everyone, and thank you for joining us. You're welcome to the Abuja segment of the Breakfast Show, which is now called FCT Brief. The Independent National Electoral Commission has unveiled its proposal to reform Nigeria's electoral framework in preparation for the 2027 general elections, aiming to enhance transparency, efficiency, and credibility in the democratic process. Mohammed Kuna, special advisor to the INEC chairman, presented these reforms at a retreat in Lagos hosted by the Joint Committee of the National Assembly on Electoral Matters. He emphasized that the changes are critical to fostering accountability and strengthening public trust in the electoral system. INEC is also pushing for the replacement of permanent voters' cards with electronically downloadable voters' cards, a move designed to modernize the voting process. Additionally, the Commission, alongside stakeholders like the Policy and Legacy Advocacy Center, is advocating for a single-day voting system to reduce the high cost associated with elections.
PLAT Executive Director Clement Onwako highlighted that Nigeria's election expenses nearing $500 billion are unsustainable. Ghana has successfully implemented single-day voting, and Nigeria can follow suit with proper management, he stated. Onwako also questioned the necessity of PVC, suggesting that robust voter registration and biometric systems could suffice, further streamlining the process. INEC Chairman Mahmoud Yakubu underscored the urgency of enacting these reforms promptly to allow sufficient time for implementation and preparation. Now, the retreat, supported by PLAC, the UK Foreign Commonwealth Development Office, and Development Alternatives, brought together lawmakers and electoral stakeholders to deliberate on these proposals. Now, remember that the late President Umar in 2007 established a 22-member electoral review committee led by a retired Chief Justice of Nigeria, Mohammed Uwais, to evaluate Nigeria's electoral process and recommend necessary reforms. 18 years after the submission of the comprehensive report and 2 years to the 2027 general elections, concerned Nigerians are renewing the call for full implementation of the Uwais report. The consensus is clear. Timely reforms are essential to ensure credible and cost-effective electoral process in 2027. Now, to help us understand exactly what is on the table, we have joining us Cynthia Mbamalu, Director of Programs of Yaga Africa, and she joins us live via Zoom. And in the studio, we have Umar Dan Asabe Mohammed, the Program Manager, Election Impact Development Initiative. And thanks for coming on the show.
Thank you for having me.
Good to have you.
Now, let's start with you. All right. Now, let's start with you, Dan Asabe. INEC reforms everywhere. Talk about the Uwais report. Talk about this report being proposed by INEC. Do you see the National Assembly promptly attending to read before the 2027 election?
Yeah, thank you very much once again for having me. as civil society actors on the field, we've been hoping over time that National Assembly will move speedily, with the implementation, with the passage of some of the reform bills that are currently within, their confine, so that we can also see how we can, work in collaboration with the agencies to see how these reforms can be implemented. But sadly, we can see it foot dragging. We hope that by the time we move closer to the elections, a whole lot of these bills will be, considered and passed. Also that we are moving towards Anambra. We hope that some of these bills will be passed quickly, test run in Anambra, if possible, Ekiti and Osun elections ahead of the 2027 general elections. So we hope that National Assembly will do the needful quickly so that we can put this law into practice and see how it will fare in the 2027 general elections.
Well, some people say the real issue isn't with the reforms themselves, but with the people not trusting INEC enough to do its job diligently. Do you agree with this? Is it more about the system or the people that are running it?
I think it's both ways, right? But for us, we've seen situation where these reforms have, have been put in place, and we expect that, the reforms will be test run and we get feedback, based on what we expect these reforms to carry to give back. But unfortunately, you go on the field on election day, you start seeing something else entirely. So you cannot separate, strong institutional framework, with the quality of the people on the field. For the quality of people on the field, we can keep sensitizing, we can keep, telling people the importance of going, adhering to these laws. But then, a framework that is strong enough, to be manipulated, by citizens. I think it's another way to go also. I think the reform is also a good way for us to go, get a watertight, laws that people won't be able to bend easily.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, Ms. Mbamalu, this for you. You with us?
Yes.
Okay, now.
Yes, I can hear you.
All right, now let's look at these reforms. Now, what are those low-hanging, let me use the word fruits, that we can say, okay, in the immediate, these are the things INEC should handle, considering the West report and considering the ones that INEC is pushing forward, whether the PVCs, the stopping the use of PVC and all that. So, can you help us identify some of these immediate ones that is essential for the credible election in 2027?
Thank you. I think there are key provisions that require immediate attention, at least for those that only require an amendment to the Electoral Act, because the proposals currently, there are some provisions that will require an amendment to the Constitution, and then some that is just strictly the Electoral Act. For me, the low-hanging fruits are to begin with those that are at the Electoral Act level, meaning that we just need the National Assembly, both chambers, to amend those sections. The first one, obviously, would be the issues around electronic transmission of results. If you remember that the IREV was introduced by the Electoral Commission based on its power in the Electoral Act to determine the mode of results transmission. However, from the court decision in the Presidential Tribunal, there's an urgent need for the sections relating to results management to be reviewed to clearly provide the mode of transmission that enables a supplementary or complementary process of electronic transmission of results. So that, I believe, is key. So if you look at sections 60 of the Electoral Act and there are other subsequent sections actually that require some level of cross-referencing to connect the transmission from polling units to the last stage. So, we move from polling unit to ward to LGA, but to ensure that there is that clear, how do I put it, provisions on how results move, both the manual transmission and manual transfer and the electronic transmission. That, I believe, is key. The second is this voters card. If you know, every year, when we have continuous registration, voters register. And now we have a biometric system with the beavers. Yeah. I do believe that we've come to a point where we no longer need the restrictions of the voters card and the hurdle in even getting your permanent voters card. And I do believe that the sections, for instance, we have sections 47 that mandate that for a voter to vote, you must present a voters card at the polling unit. That is a provision that can be amended by the National Assembly. It does not need an amendment to the Constitution. I do believe that INEC is right in pushing for that, and a lot of young people and citizens would appreciate that. The hurdle of collecting PVCs, or people even having to spend monies to travel to get their PVCs, that can be done away with the amendment of the sections. One, reviewing the means of voter accreditation to one, focus on the electronic or biometric accreditation of voters, and then remove that requirement for INEC to produce and issue permanent voters card. I believe that is also an important low-hanging fruit. The third for me is around early voting for those that work on elections day. My brother and sister, you know, as media practitioners, I'm sure on elections day, most of you are either in the studio or out in the field at different locations. Same also for all INEC officials. If you think about the polling and the ad hoc officials, if you think about the permanent and both the permanent staff and non-permanent staff of the Electoral Commission, think of all the security personnel, observers. We did not get to vote. In fact, last elections, over 2 million Nigerians could not vote because we were working on elections day. INEC alone deployed about 1.6 million officials. And so early voting, I believe, is important because all we need to do is amend.
Well, we seem to have lost connection there.
Well, Mr. Asabi, I'd like to ask you, INEC is pushing for a change in the law so that the president no longer appoints resident electoral commissioners. Do you think this could reduce political interference in the elections?
Yeah, personally, for us as Kimpact Development Initiative, we feel there is need for that section to also go further, right? Not just resident electoral commissioner, but even the chairman itself. Because for us to really get an independent INEC, the appointment of the chairman and every other appointments that trickles down must be taken away from, the president that is equally, a member of the political party and also an interested party, in an area where the president also may likely, also be interested in, for instance, elections, right? So there is this popular saying that says he who pays the piper dictates the tune, right? So if the president elects the chairman, there is, a bit of lack of independence, when it comes to, the operationalization of that institution. So we are looking at, possibility where the appointment of INEC chairman and even the commissioners down to the recs, can be saddled, within the responsibility of a committee. For instance, we have the National Peace Committee that currently works, around peaceful elections. So that National Peace Committee is constituted of people with impeccable character. So by the time they come to you, as a political party or a candidate and say we want peaceful election, you know that they are neutral because of the quality of individuals that make up the National Peace Committee, right? So we are looking at a committee that will be set up by the National Assembly, with people of impeccable character. For instance, we are looking at, even somebody from the National Peace Committee being part of that committee. We are looking at Nigeria Bar Association. We are thinking of civil society. We are thinking of the Youth Council, academics. There are people, when you speak of their name, that these people are of impeccable character. From this committee, and to be the one to, put forward names of credible individuals that are capable of, taking the responsibility of INEC, of leading, INEC, and put before the National Assembly, and this is ratified, then we'll move forward with it. So not just the rest, it should go, down to even the chairman and also the electoral commissioners.
All right, we'll continue the conversation, but that will be right after this break. Don't go anywhere. There's more after this break. Stay with us. We're glad to have you back. It's still FCT Brief, and we are still discussing electoral reforms ahead of the 2027 election, and we have two policy advocacy analysts discussing this with us on the program this morning. Now, Mrs. Mbamalu, I would like to ask you, INEC suggesting that the president should no longer have power to appoint a resident electoral commissioner sounds like a step towards fairness, right? But who would you say should handle this appointment? Your colleague here suggested that a committee should be set up, to handpick these names. But in your own perspective, who would you say should be responsible for picking this name that will be credible and, show transparency and also win the people's trust in this regard?
Well, I believe that we need to have an application process for that. It should be like how when you want to get a job, you apply. And then there's a screening committee to review the applications made up of different personalities. While you have INEC, so it should look like an employment process based on your capacity and based on your competency and based on the additional experiences that you have when it comes to elections. And I think the fourth part is your character. And for me, what is important is to professionalize the process of leadership emergence in the Electoral Commission, especially at the state level. And so the proposal, I do agree with the proposal because that way it limits the political interference of the appointment process, especially for the state resident electoral commissioners, because that is the main proposal. And so it should be professionalized, that when the period is a broad call for application, you submit with your state, just like how you apply for a job. But this time, not just for any job, how you apply for high jobs at the global level, those kinds of qualifications. There's a process of submission. There is a screening of the intending participants, and there's a committee set up made up of professionals from both electoral elections management body itself and experts from elections, including people that engage the electoral process. So even representatives from the civil society, from the media, and even from the security. That way you have a robust screening team to review the applicants that you have. And I also believe that they should have some level of public engagement on that. There's nothing wrong in having proposed candidates, their names published for citizens to also either give an objection or give a proposal, and to also have like a process of collecting from the people what kinds of qualities that they need from applicants. I do believe that making that a professional process makes it easier for the Electoral Commission to recruit leaders at the state level that can manage elections administration. I think of the big companies in the private sector, but it's when they are getting personnel to head key departments or key arms of the organization, they go for the best. For elections management, we need the best. And I do believe that that is a proposal that can be considered. Let that power be removed from the president to limit the political interference. What we have most times is political patronages and settlements that ends up yielding individuals who are more loyal to whomever brought them in than focusing on the work that brought them in and loyal to the citizens and to our nation. And I am big on this proposal. We can professionalize this. We need an electoral commission that is led by professionals with the right capacity, competency, and character. I do believe that that is the way to go.
Okay. Mr. Danesabe, let's come to this aspect. We're fixated about the national election. And there are also critical elections, the subnational elections, because politics is from the grassroots. If we don't get it right at the grassroots, it will affect whatever we produce at the top. Some have suggested that election management at the subnational level should be moved from the state's independent electoral commission to INEC. Why are we thinking so much about concentrating powers in the center supervising elections at the subnational? Now, what kind of reforms do you think we can have to bring credibility to that particular level?
Yeah, so before the 1999 constitutions, we have constitution in the past that has conducted, elections to the subnational level, saddled in the neck, as it were then, currently INEC. And they did this and they conducted elections perfectly, right? So for me, I feel if you look at what we have in place currently, where the State Independent Electoral Commission conducts elections, for local government, for instance. Across Nigeria, if you go to any of the states, it's like a one-way, victory for whichever political party that is in place, at the state level. In fact, in some states, you see oppositions don't even bother fielding candidates because they know there won't be elections, right? We've seen in states that have done elections in the past, it's pretty much, just a one-way thing. And by the time you inquire as regards some of the processes, because the SEC are supposed to borrow leave from INEC procedures, to conduct these elections. Sometimes you go to polling units, you don't even see, officials there, ad hoc officials there conducting elections. But results from those polling units are announced and candidates are declared. By the time you request for, results from those polling units, they are not even, physical results, certified through copy results. You won't even see, they won't even respond to you. We've seen this situation across board where, it's just more like a charade. People just sit down, formulate results, make announcement. So for us, we feel that if governance, if governance is for the people and should work for the people should be able to determine, who represents them at that level. And at the local level, which is closer, which brings governance closer to the people, we feel it's very, very paramount. As we have it now, the local government system is pretty much, in comatose because governance at that level does not exist. And if you must get good governance, you must start from, politics, the election of these individuals, into governance. And that must be done by the people and not just people seated somewhere, collating names. INEC, as it's currently, constituted, is already overburdened. We are seeing that situation of INEC, being overburdened. Pundits have said, there is need to unbundle INEC, take some of the responsibilities, away from INEC so that INEC, can concentrate, and do these elections. So we believe that this responsibility can be saddled with INEC, but take away some other responsibilities, away from them. For instance, we want we are looking at a situation, an INEC that is not saddled with the responsibility of prosecuting election offenders. Let that responsibility be taken away from INEC. Yeah. We are looking at an INEC that, is not saddled with the responsibility of political party regulations. They are not even big on that currently, because we can see, when you go to the field, even pre-elections, after primaries, crises, court cases, and all that, ahead of elections.
I'd like you to hold that thought. Ms. Mbamalu, are you still here with us?
I can hear you.
Well, INEC wants to let people download their voters card electronically, say from what is being practiced currently where you have your PVCs issued to you. This sounds very convenient, but considering challenges people might face, especially those living in rural areas, do you think this will make this process smoother and easier?
Thank you. I wanted to quickly respond to the SEC conversation. I do believe that we need an independent system of state independent electoral commission. What are the two major things that can support strengthening that? Because the thing is, what is the challenge? Why is SEC challenged to conduct local elections? First, I believe what SEC needs is fiscal autonomy. Currently, they do not have fiscal autonomy. So most times they even struggle for funds to conduct elections. Second for me, the sections on local elections, for instance, needs to be taken away from the determination of the governors. And what we need is a clarity in the review of that section to provide for, one, periodic conduct of elections at the local level. That clearly, the way we have for the national elections that says not later than 30 days, not earlier than 150 days before the end of tenure, elections will be conducted for president, for governors. The way we have that provision, we need it clearly stated for local governments too. That's where there is a clarity on timeline for elections to be conducted, and that way SEC can work.
Mrs. Mbamalu. All right. Back to you in the studio. Your group tracked over 2 billion naira spent in just the Edo and Ondo governorship election. That's huge. But with voters buying still everywhere, why is money still such a big player in our elections? And who really is failing to do their duty in stopping it? Yeah,
so I was actually going there before you stopped me earlier, because these responsibilities are also, part of the responsibilities that, INEC is supposed to, carry out, because political parties are supposed to submit audited reports, of their campaign spending, to INEC. We are seeing this happening, but then what you see in this report are way different from what you see on the field. So government institutions responsible, to track campaign financing, are really not carrying out this responsibility the way they ought to. And if you notice in elections, you will notice that government in power outspend, every other political party, taking away the fairness, from the process. But we are looking at a situation where campaign finance spending can easily be tracked by government institutions. We have the NFIU, the Nigerian Financial Intelligence Unit, saddled with some of this responsibility. The EFCC, the ICPC, on elections day, you see them on the field, looking out for vote buying, and all that. But the issue of campaign financing goes beyond vote buying.
Okay. All right, we'll come back to you. Ms. Mbamalu, now let's take a look at all these recommendations, the UWISE report recommendation, the one pushed forward by INEC and other stakeholders. Do you see enough political will to get these things done? Because it's one thing to propose before 2027, it's another thing for it to be. How do you think we can mobilize for this political will to be in place?
I think it takes a lot of pressure from citizens and the media to keep putting the issues out there. Political will is relative. There are times where there are people that are not interested, but if you have the right pressures, you can get it. Which is why I also said we need to look at the low-hanging fruit. What are the easier proposals to push for? I'm sorry I did not respond to the voters card issue. I even believe that at this point, we should do away with permanent voters card. Those are restrictions that limit voters from even voting. And at this point where we are, if the BVAS has all our information, citizens can present themselves with any identity card as long as the BVAS authenticates authenticates you, either your facials or your biometrics. And so I do believe that the restrictions on asking people to download voters card, that would also create a system where some voters will not be able to do that. We know that not every citizen has access to internet or the capacity to use technological devices. And so for me, let's focus on doing away with permanent voters card as a mandatory requirement for voters to show up at the polling unit. And then focus on those issues that are immediately important for a credible elections in the next electoral phase. Electronic transmission of results is key. Early voting for those that work on elections is key. Diaspora voting is something we can begin to consider now. We have a lot of citizens who are not in the country, who have a say, or who ought to have a say in the country. And then issues around the reviews, the review of appointive powers, especially, like we said, we can begin with the state, the resident electoral commissioners at the state level. While we focus on calling for a new INEC. I think a new INEC is a demand we can make. There would be appointments soon of a replacement of the INEC chair and some other vacancies at the leadership positions. This is a time for citizens to start making that demand. Who are the kinds of people we need in the Electoral Commission? What qualifications do they have? What capacities do they bring to bear? Because at the end, if you do not have the right people appointed in the Electoral Commission, it becomes a threat to the transparency and credibility of our elections.
All right, thank you for that thought, Mr. Dan Asabe. We're coming back to this same issue of the SIEC. My worry also, like you said, because your own position is different from her own position. And my worry is, why are we pushing responsibility? You said INEC is overburdened, and you want INEC also to take on this responsibility. Can't we have a system, the one we're proposing for INEC reform, for the same to be proposed, so that you have the different tiers of government handling their own affairs? That's a democracy, isn't it?
Yes, I agree completely. But, you know, that's the reason why it's called a reform. So we'll keep, you know, making changes until we get the perfection, right? Yeah. So for what Cynthia suggested, an independent SIEC, right? So this will now take us back to who appoints the head of SIEC. Exactly. You know, how do we get, you know, to that level? And we keep, you know, creating different layers, you know, up to that level. I agree completely that there is need for, you know, local government to do their thing. For me, since local government is even a tier of government, let local government do its own election, you know, but it will take a whole lot of time before we, you know, we get there. A lot of constitutional amendment and all that. Can we start breaking it down, you know, little by little, and possibly we'll get there eventually.
Oh, Mandan Asabe, it was a pleasure speaking with you this morning. Thank you for contributing to our program. And Cynthia Mbamalu, it was also a pleasure. Thank you so much for joining the program.
Thank you.
I appreciate it.
Well, as the 2027 election draws closer, it's conversations like this that remain crucial in shaping a more transparent, inclusive, and credible system. We do hope that today's conversation sparked reflection and possibly a renewed hope onto what is to come. That's where we'll leave our conversation today. We'll now hand you over to our Lagos studio, where Veronica and the rest of the crew are standing by to continue with the rest of the show.
Right. Thank you, Eshomamo. Thank you to Jesu for that timely interview.